The original demo for my new song sounds like this. But the finished version sounds like this. A simple 30-second demo like this to a finished 3-minute plus track like the final product, you have to find a way to bring the listener on a journey so that the song is not boring. Today I want to show you 3 ways I do that through arrangement and variation. Here's what I mean. Alright, first, here's a way to take a repetitive loop and make it interesting over a longer period of time. Okay, let's say you have a repeated 4-bar drum loop. It's a pretty interesting drum loop, but if our section wants to be 8 bars long, just duplicating that is not all that interesting. We're just going to have the same thing repeated again. So instead of just repeating a 4-bar phrase, let's instead combine these 2 4-bar phrases, and let's create variation within these patterns, mainly the kick and the snare here, to make it a little more interesting to play with. I actually did that over here in the first verse, the first time the beat drops in this track coming out of the intro. Pay attention to the basic drum pattern here. Here in this first verse coming off the intro, I want the listener to feel like they're on solid ground, but I also want to keep them guessing and play with expectations. So if we look at just the snare pattern here, you'll notice occasionally we'll be omitting notes. So right here on the first bar, we have a snare hit on beat 2 and no snare hit on beat 4. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have these little fills that happen, right? So you have kind of a second little snare hit before we get to bar 3. You have a little flam here, a little roll on bar 3. Dot, dot, dot. Now omit. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look at these 8 bars and just looking at the snare pattern alone, you'll notice that it's not just looping. It's kind of different each bar, and there's not a set pattern. If we combine that with looking at the kick as well, the kick is doing a similar thing. Throughout these 8 bars, the kick is never the same, though it is still giving us something to nod our heads to. We have a full 8-bar rhythmic phrase that makes this full section more interesting because it's playing with our expectations of what the beat should be. Now later on in the track, when we get to the big chorus, the drums are much more straight ahead because there's so many other interesting things to listen to. I don't necessarily need that variation in the drums there. Listen to how these drums are now just straight ahead. That's just a pretty conventional snare on the 2 and 4, regular kick pattern, as opposed to here. We have a lot more variation, a lot more to play with. Alright, but instead of looking at those little individual ideas and making each one more interesting, let's talk about the whole track and how it evolves over time. Alright, basically here, if your track starts off as a Charmander, you want it to evolve into a Charizard by the end. And we can do this by evolving different musical ideas from the beginning to the end of the track. For instance, this main vocal melody. This is an original idea from the demo. That main vocal melody, I want it to be building to that the entire time. So the section we just heard is the main drop of the final chorus. But up until that point, we hadn't quite heard that full melody yet, but we had heard pieces of it. For instance, here in the intro at bar 5. That same vocal there's little tiny hints and pieces of it introduced or almost like foreshadowed there in the introduction. Then later, here in the first verse, I'm going to use that same vocal sample, but have it pitched down and kind of chopped a bit. Here's what it sounds like. We've got the phrases happening and also a little bit of glitchiness there. With everything else, it's still there, but we haven't given the listener yet the full melodic phrase that we're building towards. Now we're going to get closer to that by the time we get to the bridge. Let's listen to this at the bridge. It's the first time the vocal sample will be presented in its full melody, but we're going to filter it in. Finally, it's being presented here. It's sort of fading in. Finally, we're being introduced to it. Then when we get to the arrival point of that final chorus, it's that much more impactful. This vocal melody that we've heard bits and pieces of all the way through the track up until this point, it evolved from its little Charmander stage at the beginning all the way to this final form, Charizard, at the end. We finally get to hear it. And it's very satisfying as the listener to get to that point. Finally, and this is an often overlooked but super important aspect of making your music not boring, create a B section. Alright, creating a B section is not easy. It's actually one of the last parts of my compositional process, because usually I've already come up with a big chunk of the music, which ends up being like the big chorus, right? This has the most musical ideas in it. This has kind of everything I want to say, everything I want to play encapsulated within it. So then I go and reduce that and make something like a verse out of that. You hear how that's sort of a reduced version of the chorus. But to get to that very satisfying ending, we can't just stay on the same material all the time, the same chord progression, the same bass line, everything. So what I often do, if you look at the completed song from bar 1 all the way to like bar 60, you'll notice that there is a gap. And this is exactly what I do when I'm ready to build a B section. I literally take an 8-bar section of silence, of nothing, and I paste it in right where I think the B section needs to be. And for here, it's right after the first verse. I'm going to paste back in the proper B section here so you can see what is different and we can take a look and examine it. And I want to start by looking at the bass line. For the verse, for the main part of the song, the bass line is these long tones playing the root notes of the chords. It's pretty simple, right? Just long tones. And we're in the key of G. So this bass line is basically playing a 1-4, 1-4 the whole time, and it's based around the G major chord. What a B section should do is completely contrast your A section, if we want to call this previous section the A section. So just thinking about the bass line, how can we contrast it? Well, if it's slow, long notes, let's play short, moving notes with, more movement. And if it's based around a major chord, let's base it around a minor chord. So now listen to this bass line here. You can already see the visual difference between the B section and the A section bass line. Very short notes. And based around a minor chord, which has implications for the whole song, right? Now this whole section is based around a minor key. And it pushes it forward a little more with that more bouncy bass line. But notice, and one thing people probably struggle with is transitioning from an A to a B section. But what I want to point out here is that this drum pattern is essentially exactly the same as the previous drum pattern. No big difference between the drums here. In fact, it's copy and pasted from this drum pattern here in the first verse. So we kept the rhythmic material, we kept the drums and just copied and pasted them over here, but starting with the bass line, built up new musical ideas around it. So we introduce a new guitar sound here, guitar chords. And we had heard some vocal samples before, but now we're hearing a new vocal sample, which is actually my vocals, not a sample. So now that section is totally different, and it ultimately leads into our bridge, which brings back the original harmonic and melodic material. I did over an hour-long deep dive during a members-only workshop right here on the channel that you can get access to by becoming a VIP member of the channel, hitting the join button down below. You'll also get access to our Discord community as well as some free downloads and all of the previous members-only workshops. But yeah, if this subject interests you or if this is something you want to get better at, check out the full workshop, consider joining the channel. All right, if you found any of those 3 tips helpful and you want to show some appreciation, I would love it if you went to stream my track Escape. That's the track we've been looking at this whole video. Add it to your inspirational beats playlist. Of course, a like on the video, subscribe to the channel always helps, and if you want to help in a big way, click the join button, become a channel member, get free downloads, free sounds, get access to members only workshops, submit music to our track reviews and get your music reviewed by me live on stream, and just join an awesome community of other music makers from around the world. But for now, that's going to be it. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.